The EOS humanity's first interstellar colony ship, was supposed to be a beacon of hope, a new beginning for Earth's overcrowded population. But in the cold silence of space, hope can shatter as easily as glass. A sudden cosmic anomaly, invisible to sensors until it was too late, tore through the vessel like a predator ripping apart its prey. Systems failed, alarms screamed, and chaos reigned as the massive ship spiraled out of control. When the dust settled, or rather, when the debris stopped falling, the survivors found themselves stranded on an alien planet orbiting a dying red sun. It wasn't entirely barren. Strange bioluminescent plants glowed faintly across the landscape, and distant mountains shimmered with veins of crystal-like minerals. But beauty often masks danger. The air carried traces of toxic elements, forcing the colonists to rely on breathing apparatuses scavenged from the wreckage. Among the survivors was Dr. Ilias Venn, a xenobiologist whose reputation preceded him. Known for his brilliance, but also his aloofness, Ilias had spent years studying extraterrestrial ecosystems from afar. Now fate had dropped him into one, a real, living, breathing alien world. While others focused on survival, Elias felt drawn to explore. He couldn't shake the feeling that this planet held secrets far beyond what anyone could imagine. One day, while venturing farther than he should have, Elias stumbled upon something extraordinary. Deep within a grove of glowing flora, he saw her, a young alien girl crouched on the ground, her slender frame trembling slightly. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver under the dim light, and her large eyes reflected hues of violet and gold. Those eyes were filled with tears, streaming silently down her cheeks as she cradled a small injured creature in her arms. Elias froze, unsure whether to approach or retreat. She didn't look dangerous, but appearances could deceive. As if sensing his presence, the girl looked up, locking gazes with him. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, without warning, a voice echoed in his mind, not spoken aloud, but resonating directly in his thoughts. Danger comes. The voice whispered urgently. You must leave. Before Elias could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. From the shadows emerged creatures unlike anything he'd ever seen, long-limbed predators with jagged exoskeletons and glowing red eyes. They moved fast, closing in on the pair with predatory grace. Without hesitation, the girl grabbed Elias by the wrist, pulling him toward safety. Despite her delicate appearance, she moved with incredible speed, weaving between trees and rocks as though she knew the terrain intimately. The predators gave chase, their guttural growls echoing through the forest. They finally reached a narrow crevice hidden behind thick vines, where they both collapsed, gasping for breath. Outside, the creatures prowled, unable to find them. Elias turned to the girl, who now stared at him intently, her tear-streaked face illuminated softly by the glow of nearby plants. What are you? Elias asked quietly, though he doubted she would understand. Instead of answering verbally, she placed a hand over her chest and then pointed to him. Somehow, Elias understood. It was a gesture of connection, perhaps even trust. Whatever this mysterious girl was, one thing became clear. She needed help, just as much as humanity did. And somehow, their fates were now intertwined. When Elias returned to the colony camp with the alien girl in tow, he expected resistance. And he got it. The survivors were already on edge, their nerves frayed by hunger, fatigue, and the constant threat of the planet's toxic environment. When they saw the shimmering, otherworldly figure walking beside Elias, some recoiled in fear while others glared with suspicion. "She's not safe," muttered Commander Rhea Cole, the de facto leader of the group. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she studied the girl. "We don't know what she is, or what she's capable of." "She saved my life," Elias countered firmly, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. He stepped protectively in front of the girl, who stood silently, her luminous eyes scanning the crowd. If anything, She might be our best chance at surviving here." The argument went on for hours, but eventually, cooler heads prevailed. With no clear alternative, the group reluctantly agreed to let her stay, at least until they understood more about her. Elias named her Lyora, after an ancient word meaning light, because her presence seemed to radiate a quiet warmth that contrasted sharply with the harshness of their situation. Over the next few days, Lyora began to reveal glimpses of her abilities. She healed a deep cut on a child's arm simply by placing her hand over the wound, leaving behind faint traces of glowing energy that faded within seconds. She guided the settlers to hidden pools of drinkable water and showed them which plants could be safely consumed. Each act of kindness earned her cautious trust from some, but not all, of the survivors. Through gestures, emotions, and fragmented telepathic projections, Lyora communicated snippets of her world. Elias learned that this planet wasn't just a random rock floating in space. It was alive, a sentient ecosystem where every living thing was connected. Lyora herself seemed to embody this connection. The markings on her skin pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, whenever she used her powers. But there was a cost. After each display of her abilities, Lyora grew visibly weaker. Her radiant glow dimmed slightly, and her movements became slower, heavier. One evening, as they sat together near the edge of the camp, Elias noticed how pale she looked compared to when they'd first met. "You're hurting yourself," he said softly, watching her closely. "Every time you help us, it takes something from you." Lyora tilted her head, her violet gold eyes meeting his. Without words, she reached out and placed a hand on his chest, right above his heart. A surge of warmth spread through him, accompanied by fleeting images, a starry sky, a field of glowing flowers, and finally, a sense of unity so profound it brought tears to his eyes. Elias realized then that Lyora didn't see her sacrifices as burdens. To her, helping others was part of who she was, woven into the very fabric of her existence. But even as he admired her selflessness, he couldn't ignore the growing unease in his gut. What would happen if she pushed herself too far? The question lingered unanswered until tragedy struck. Another survivor, a young engineer named Mira, collapsed after being exposed to the planet's toxic atmosphere during an expedition. Her condition worsened rapidly, and the makeshift medical supplies weren't enough to save her. Desperation filled the air as people turned to Lyora, their last hope. Standing over Mira's unconscious body, Lyora hesitated for the first time. Her glowing eyes flickered with uncertainty, and Elias saw the weight of her decision etched onto her face. Saving Mira would mean risking her own strength further, but letting her die would break the fragile bond she had built with the humans. With a deep breath, Lyora knelt beside Mira and placed her hands on the woman's chest. A soft hum filled the air as golden light enveloped them both. Moments later, Mira stirred, gasping for breath as color returned to her cheeks. Cheers erupted around them, but Elias barely heard them. His gaze was fixed on Lyora, whose glow had dimmed significantly, her body swaying unsteadily. As she rose to her feet, Lyora looked at Elias, her eyes filled with resolve and sadness. For the first time, Elias wondered if her light would fade completely before their journey ended. The next morning, Elias woke to find Lyora standing at the edge of the camp, staring into the distance. Her glowing skin had dimmed further, and she seemed lost in thought, or perhaps communicating with the planet itself. He approached cautiously, unsure if she wanted company. But when she turned to look at him, her expression softened, and she gestured for him to follow. They set out together, leaving the safety of the colony behind. Lyora led the way through dense forests of bioluminescent trees, their trunks pulsing faintly as though alive. The air felt different here, charged, almost electric. Elias noticed that the plants seemed to respond to Lyora's presence, their lights brightening slightly as she passed. It was as if the planet recognized her, welcoming her back. After hours of walking, they reached a clearing where the ground was littered with ancient ruins. Crumbling stone structures rose from the earth like ghostly remnants of a forgotten age. Intricate carvings covered every surface, depicting scenes of harmony between beings and nature. In one image, humanoid figures stood surrounded by glowing flora and fauna, their hands raised toward the sky. In another, they merged with the environment, becoming part of the land itself. Elias knelt to examine the carvings more closely. "This place, it tells a story," he murmured, tracing the patterns with his fingers. "These people, they were connected to the planet, just like you." Leora nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting sadness. She placed her hand on one of the stones, and a wave of energy rippled outward. Images flooded Elias's mind. Visions of a thriving civilization living in perfect balance with their world. Then came darker images, fire raining from the skies, cities crumbling, and a desperate exodus. Leora's voice echoed in his thoughts, fragmented but clear. My people, we were caretakers. We protected worlds, but our home fell to war. Elias looked up at her, realization dawning. "You're not from this planet, are you?" Leora shook her head. Through flashes of memory, she revealed that her species, the Luminae, had once traveled across galaxies, nurturing planets and ensuring their ecosystems thrived. When their own world was destroyed, survivors like Leora were sent to safeguard other planets, places teetering on the brink of collapse. This desolate world orbiting the dying sun was one such place. As they delved deeper into the ruins, Leora showed Elias something extraordinary, a massive crystal embedded in the center of the clearing. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow, synchronized with the markings on her skin. She touched it gently, and the light intensified, bathing them both in warmth. Elias felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to Leora, but to everything around him. For a brief moment, he understood the planet's heartbeat, its pain, and its resilience. But the peace was short-lived. The ground trembled violently, and a low rumble echoed through the air. Leora pulled away from the crystal, her expression grim. She pointed toward the horizon, where dark clouds gathered unnaturally fast. Lightning crackled within them, and the wind carried an acrid scent. The anomaly. Her voice whispered in his mind. It harms the core. If it continues, the planet will die. And so will all who live here. Elias stared at her, dread settling in his chest. Is there any way to stop it? Leora hesitated before nodding. She placed her hands over her heart, then extended them toward the crystal. The message was clear. She could stabilize the planet's core, but doing so would require immense energy. Energy she might not survive giving. Elias clenched his fists, anger and helplessness warring inside him. There has to be another way. Leora simply gazed at him, her luminous eyes filled with determination. She didn't need words to convey her resolve. This was her purpose, to protect, to heal, even at great personal cost. And yet, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that accepting her sacrifice meant failing her in some fundamental way. As they made their way back to the colony, Elias found himself replaying the visions Leora had shared. The Luminae had given everything to preserve life. Now, it seemed, Leora was prepared to do the same. But deep down, he vowed to find another solution, even if it meant defying fate itself. Back at the colony, tensions flared as news of Leora's plan spread. Commander Rhea Cole called an emergency meeting in the makeshift shelter that served as their command center. The air was thick with unease as survivors crowded around, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. "She says she can save the planet," Elias explained, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "But it will cost her everything." Rhea crossed her arms, her sharp gaze locking onto him. "And we're just supposed to let her throw herself away. What happens if this sacrifice doesn't work? Then we lose her and our only chance at survival." Others chimed in, their voices rising in heated debate. Some argued that Leora had already done enough, that risking her life further was selfish and reckless. Others believed her selflessness was proof of her commitment to humanity's survival. A Amid the chaos, Leora stood quietly near the entrance, her glowing eyes scanning the room. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone seemed to amplify the weight of the decision. Elias turned to face the group, his tone firm. "I've seen what she can do. I felt the connection she has with this planet. If anyone can stabilize the core, it's her. But at what cost?" Rhea shot back. "We don't even know if this is reversible. Once she gives herself to the planet, that's it. She's gone." The argument dragged on, dividing the survivors into factions. One side, led by Rhea, pushed for alternative solutions, mining the planet's resources recklessly, building escape pods, anything to avoid relying solely on Leora. The other side, inspired by her acts of kindness, insisted that trusting her was their best, and perhaps only, hope. That night, Elias sought out Leora outside the camp. She sat cross-legged under the twin moons, her skin dimmer than ever, almost translucent. He hesitated before sitting beside her, unsure how to begin. Finally, he spoke softly. "Do you really think this is the only way?" Leora looked at him, her violet gold eyes shimmering faintly. Without words, she reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. Images flooded his mind. A vast network of energy flowing through the planet, threads of light connecting every living thing. At its center was a pulsating orb, the planet's heart, now fractured and unstable. He saw flashes of destruction, storms raging, ground splitting open, the skies darkening forever. Then came another vision. Leora stepping forward, merging with the core. Her body dissolved into streams of golden light, weaving through the cracks, healing the fractures. The planet stabilized, its glow returning stronger than before. But when the vision ended, Leora was gone. Elias swallowed hard, his throat tight. "You'll be erased completely. Is that fair?" Leora tilted her head, studying him with an expression both sad and serene. Slowly, she traced a finger over her chest, then pointed to him. The message was clear. Her essence would live on, not in her physical form, but in the memories of those she touched. Before Elias could respond, shouts erupted from the camp. A group of settlers, frustrated by the lack of progress, had begun dismantling equipment to mine nearby crystals against Leora's warnings. Their actions triggered tremors, sending shockwaves rippling across the ground. Panic broke out as the earth cracked beneath their feet. Leora sprang to her feet, grabbing Elias's arm. Together, they ran toward the chaos. As they reached the miners, one of them stumbled into a fissure, crying for help. Without hesitation, Leora leaped forward, using her powers to mend the crack and pull the man to safety. But the effort drained her visibly. Her glow dimmed further, and she collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily. Elias knelt beside her, gripping her hand tightly. "You can't keep doing this," he whispered urgently. "There has to be another way." Leora shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. Through their bond, he heard her silent reply. Sometimes, there is no other way. As dawn broke, the survivors gathered again, their divisions still raw. But this time, they listened, not just to Elias, but to the quiet strength radiating from Leora. Though many feared losing her, they began to realize that rejecting her sacrifice meant rejecting the very hope she represented. Reluctantly, they agreed to support her mission, but not without vowing to honor her memory. With heavy hearts, Elias and Leora prepared for the journey to the planet's core, knowing that whatever awaited them, it would change everything, for better or worse. The journey to the planet's core was anything but simple. Leora and Elias ventured deep into uncharted territory, guided by faint pulses of energy that resonated with her glowing skin. The landscape grew stranger the farther they traveled. Towering crystalline spires pierced the sky. Rivers of molten light snaked through valleys, and the air hummed with an otherworldly vibration. It felt as though the planet itself was alive, watching, waiting. Elias struggled to keep up, his breaths shallow against the thinning atmosphere. He glanced at Leora often, worried by how fragile she looked. Her once brilliant glow had dimmed to a pale shimmer, and her movements were slower, heavier. Yet her determination never wavered. Every step forward seemed driven by a purpose deeper than survival, a calling she couldn't ignore. As they climbed down into a massive cavern, the source of the pulsating energy became clear. At its center floated a swirling orb of pure light, suspended mid-air like a miniature sun. This was the planet's heart, the core that sustained everything. But something was wrong. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, leaking dark tendrils of energy that twisted unnaturally in the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the temperature fluctuated wildly, shifting from icy cold to searing heat in moments. Leora approached cautiously, her hand outstretched. When she touched the orb, a surge of power coursed through her, causing her to stagger backward. She turned to Elias, her violet gold eyes filled with urgency. Through their bond, he understood what she needed to do. She would channel all her remaining energy into the core, healing the fractures and restoring balance. But doing so would leave nothing of her behind, not even a memory beyond what others chose to hold on to. "This is it," Elias said quietly, his voice trembling. "Are you sure about this?" Leora nodded, placing a hand over her chest. Then, with deliberate care, she gestured toward him, her fingers tracing invisible lines in the air. Images flooded his mind once more. Her homeworld, lush and vibrant before war reduced it to ash. The faces of her people, smiling warmly before fading into shadow. And finally, herself, standing alone on this alien planet, ready to give everything for those who now called it home. "I'll stay with you until the end," Elias promised, his voice thick with emotion. "You won't face this alone." Together, they prepared for the final act. Leora stepped closer to the orb, her body beginning to emit a soft golden glow. The cracks in the core responded, widening slightly as if resisting her presence. Suddenly, the cavern shook violently, sending rocks tumbling from above. From the darkness emerged mechanical figures, remnants of the ancient civilization that once thrived here. These automatons, guardians of the planet's secrets, mistook Elias and Leora for intruders. "Stay back," Elias shouted, grabbing a fallen shard of crystal to defend himself. The machines advanced, their metallic limbs glinting menacingly in the dim light. One lunged at Leora, but she raised a hand instinctively, creating a barrier of energy that repelled it. However, the effort drained her further, her glow flickering dangerously. Realizing there was no time to waste, Leora turned back to the core. With one last look at Elias, she whispered silently into his mind, "Remember me." Then, without hesitation, she embraced the orb, merging completely with its radiant light. Waves of energy erupted outward, engulfing the cavern and destabilizing the automatons, which collapsed into lifeless heaps. The cracks in the core sealed themselves, and the orb pulsed steadily, stronger than ever. Elias shielded his eyes from the blinding light, tears streaming down his face. When the glow subsided, Leora was gone. Her physical form dissolved entirely. All that remained was a faint echo of warmth, lingering like a gentle breeze. Clutching the crystal shard tightly, Elias whispered, "I promise I will." Outside, the skies cleared, and the violent tremor ceased. The planet breathed again, healed by the sacrifice of the girl who had given everything to save it, and everyone on it. Elias stood frozen in the cavern, his heart heavy with loss. The air around him hummed softly, charged with the energy of the now stabilized core. Golden light still lingered faintly on the walls, remnants of Leora's final act. He reached out tentatively, touching the smooth surface of the orb. For a brief moment, he felt her presence, a gentle warmth, a whisper of gratitude. And then it faded, leaving only silence. The journey back to the colony was long and somber. Each step weighed heavily on Elias, not just from exhaustion, but from the knowledge that Leora was truly gone. Her sacrifice had saved the planet, and likely everyone on it. but the cost felt unbearable. As he trudged through glowing forests and jagged cliffs, memories of their time together flooded his mind. Her quiet determination, her selfless acts, the way she had trusted him even when others doubted her. When Elias finally returned to the camp, the survivors greeted him with a mix of relief and sorrow. Word of Leora's sacrifice had spread quickly, carried by those who had witnessed the calming of the storms and the return of balance to the environment. The toxic winds had subsided, and patches of greenery began sprouting where barren land once stretched endlessly. It was undeniable. Leora's gift had transformed the planet. But celebration was muted. Many settlers gathered around Elias, their faces etched with guilt and grief. "We didn't deserve her," one woman murmured, tears streaming down her cheeks. Others nodded silently, unable to meet his eyes. Even Commander Rhea Cole, usually stoic and unyielding, looked shaken. "She gave everything for us," Elias said firmly, addressing the crowd. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed forward. "She didn't ask for thanks or recognition. All she wanted was to protect this world. And us. If we're going to honor her, we need to live up to that example." Inspired by his words, the settlers vowed to change their ways. They dismantled plans for reckless mining operations and instead focused on sustainable practices, using resources wisely and respecting the delicate ecosystem Leora had sacrificed herself to save. Gardens were planted, water sources preserved, and efforts made to coexist peacefully with the planet's native creatures. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly improved for the colonists. Yet Elias couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness inside him. Every night, he wandered the outskirts of the camp, drawn to places where Leora's presence still seemed strongest. The groves of bioluminescent plants, the ruins they had explored together, the crystal-clear pools she had shown him. Sometimes he swore he could feel her nearby, as if she were watching over them all. One evening, while exploring a remote valley, Elias stumbled upon something extraordinary. Nestled among rocks and vines was a cluster of flowers identical to those near where he'd first met Leora. Their petals shimmered faintly under the twin moons, casting soft glows onto the ground. As he knelt to examine them, a wave of warmth washed over him, a sensation so familiar it brought tears to his eyes. For a fleeting moment, he heard her voice again, not in words but in feelings. Thank you. Elias smiled despite his sadness, brushing his fingers gently over the petals. "No," he whispered. "Thank you, Leora." In that instant, he realized her legacy wasn't just in the thriving planet or the settlers' newfound harmony. It was in the connection she had forged, the lives she had touched. Though she was no longer physically present, her spirit lived on in every act of kindness, every choice to protect rather than exploit, every moment of unity between human and alien. As Elias walked back to the camp, the flowers glowing softly behind him, he resolved to carry her memory forward, not as a burden, but as a beacon of hope. Leora had given humanity a second chance, not just to survive, but to thrive. And Elias would ensure they didn't waste it. Her final gift wasn't just salvation. It was the reminder that even in the darkest times, compassion and sacrifice could create new beginnings. Years passed, and the colony flourished under the watchful gaze of a planet that seemed almost alive. The settlers had learned to live in harmony with their surroundings, guided by the lessons Leora had left behind. Gardens bloomed where once there was barren dust, and streams flowed clear and pure. Even the skies, now free from toxic clouds, sparkled with stars brighter than anyone remembered. Elias dedicated his life to studying the planet's ecosystem, documenting its wonders in meticulous detail. His notes filled journals upon journals, each page brimming with sketches of glowing plants, curious creatures, and intricate carvings left behind by the ancient civilization. But more than anything, he wrote about Leora, her courage, her selflessness, and the profound impact she'd had on humanity. He titled his work *, the girl who became the light *, hoping future generations would remember her not as an alien, but as a hero who transcended species and borders. The settlers themselves adopted rituals inspired by Leora's legacy. On the anniversary of her sacrifice, they gathered in the grove where Elias had found the glowing flowers. They lit lanterns made from bioluminescent petals and released them into the air, watching as they drifted skyward like tiny stars. It became a tradition, a way to honor her memory and reaffirm their commitment to protecting the world she had saved. One day, as Elias stood in the grove surrounded by younger settlers who had only heard stories of Leora, a young girl approached him. Her name was Mira, the same engineer whose life Leora had saved years ago. Now grown, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her eyes reflecting gratitude and determination. "Dr. Venn," she began hesitantly, holding out a small object wrapped in cloth. I wanted to give you this." Curious, Elias unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a delicate pendant shaped like a flower, its surface etched with faint markings similar to those on Leora's skin. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "Where did you find it?" Mira smiled shyly. "In the ruins. I thought maybe it belonged to her, or at least something connected to her." Elias ran his fingers over the pendant, feeling a familiar warmth emanate from it. For a moment, he imagined hearing Leora's voice again, not in words, but in feelings of reassurance and pride. "Thank you," he murmured. "This means more than you know." That night, Elias sat alone beneath the twin moons, clutching the pendant tightly. Around him, the glowing flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their light casting soft shadows across the ground. He closed his eyes, letting memories of Leora wash over him. The way she had trusted him, the sacrifices she had made, the hope she had given to everyone. As he opened his eyes, he noticed something unusual. One of the flowers nearby shimmered brighter than the others, pulsing rhythmically as if responding to his presence. Slowly, he reached out to touch it, and a wave of warmth spread through him. In that fleeting moment, he felt her again, not as a distant memory, but as a living force intertwined with the planet itself. Elias smiled, tears streaming down his face. "You're still here," he whispered, "aren't you?" Though no answer came, the gentle hum of the planet's energy was enough. Leora's essence remained, woven into every leaf, every stream, every heartbeat of the world she had loved so deeply. Years later, when Elias grew old and frail, he returned to the grove one final time. Surrounded by settlers who now called the planet home, he gazed up at the stars and spoke his last words aloud. "She showed us what it means to truly live, not just for ourselves, but for each other." And as his journey ended, the flowers glowed brighter than ever, a testament to the light Leora had brought into their lives and the legacy she had left behind.